Well, we're back at it.
Back at it again, and a lot has changed since the last time you and I were speaking, Corey. I think the last time we were on this show, we were friends with pretty much everybody in the world, and now things have dramatically changed.
What a difference a day makes.
Yeah, it sure has, yeah. Lots of people are worrying about their investments and about their financial plans and their future and tariffs and what's going to happen next. So there's some interesting conversations that are happening in our rooms all the time. That's who knows what's going to happen next 60, 90 days.
Well, all we know is something's going to happen.
That's all we know.
That's the only guarantee is something is going to continuously happen in this environment. So at some point it'll rectify itself, but it doesn't look like it's anytime soon.
Kind of a good reminder though to stay the course, have a good plan, have those really good discussions, and get pain points and concerns out there with your advisory team, just to find out, hey, am I going to be okay? Do I need to worry about anything?
I totally agree, right? I think it's when we're in times of uncertainty that's the time to do nothing.
Yeah, and spring is coming. So everybody's looking forward, new chapter, new things coming.
Moving forward. Well, we have an interesting guest today.
I'm looking forward to it. And of course, this is this podcast, when we first started this is now, I think we're into 3 or 4 seasons now. The intention was to meet and have great conversations with successful business owners. We often meet them. Of course, we can't talk about those conversations a lot, but this gives us an opportunity to kind of open those doors and have great chats with people who have seen something, built something interesting, and have maybe some conversations about how that journey went, the challenges they had. And I couldn't think of a better guest than to have the person that you're going to introduce here in a second.
Well, Chris knows people. Chris Reynolds has been around for a long time in this industry. He's a natural relationship building skills and strong business acumen, founder of Investment Planning Council, IPC, in 1994. I can't even believe that, 1994.
Yep.
Since then, Chris has helped to grow the company and position it at the forefront of Canada's ever-evolving wealth management industry. He's served as founder and CEO and now executive chair, and continues to bring his passion for client experience, people, and business to every facet of his role. Beginning his career as a financial advisor and branch manager, he served the financial industry for over 30 years, consistently contributing and innovating, sharing his breadth of knowledge and insights on how advisors can best serve their clients. He's authored 2 books, hosted several radio talk shows, and appeared at multiple conferences across Canada. Today, Chris focuses much of his energy inspiring his team to create and embrace new opportunities in the wealth management industry, guided by the evolving client needs. Strong advocate for the value of advice delivered by professional financial advisors, and consistently encourages all those he works with to efficiently deliver human-centered advice to Canadian families in an increasingly impactful and tailored ways. Since 2022, Chris has been hosting the Turning the Page podcast, where he brings winning ideas and learnings to help advisors better navigate relationships, excel at client experience, and overall build a better business. Podcast has featured a multitude of people from the advisory industry, veterans to visionaries across different verticals. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you very much. It's good to see my PR people are keeping up with that long introduction there.
Well, if it wasn't for us pumping you, that pumped you up pretty good. Yeah. I'm super excited.
I don't know what you're talking about at all there. Yeah.
Chris, you're an industry legend. This is going to be an exciting conversation. I'm really excited to spend some time with you over the next little bit. You've got so much to tell, and what a story that IPC and yourself have had over the past many years, and we're really excited to hear some more about it.
Well, thank you. As I said, I'm a big fan of the show. I love what you guys are doing, and I'm just happy to be here to contribute.
I appreciate that. So I know you and I recently had a chance to go just happen chance, sat next to you at a table, had a great conversation. We got to share some stories. I know you have a very interesting beginning. I'd love to take it back there for a second. Just at the table, you were telling me about there was a horse ranch, I believe, and I think there was some it was a good starting point for us today. So if you don't mind, maybe just sharing some of that and how it started for you, Chris.
Yeah. No, so I started, everyone asks, how did you get into this business? And even I sometimes wonder how I got into this business because I grew up on a horse farm. My dad actually trained racehorses and trained just north of Toronto. He trained at Woodbine Racetrack, and we had a big facility up there. And my father thought that he had kids for free labor. That was his theory, right? So we would get up early and before daylight and go and look after the horses, then go to school all day, and then come back and have more chores. And I thought, this is the worst thing ever. There's got to be a better way to make a living. And there used to be this guy that used to hang around the farm all the time, never seemed to work, had a Mercedes, he had a big phone before anyone had a phone, those big Zach
Big
Morris
monsters,
phones,
yeah.
the big, that you could use as a defense mechanism if you needed to. But for an impressionable teenager, I was like, wow, I don't know what this guy does, but I should ask him. And one day, sort of got the bravery to walk up, and I'm like, what do you do for a living? I never see you actually do anything. What do you do? And he's like, I'm a financial advisor. And I'm like, I don't know what a financial advisor is, but that's what I'm going to be.
Yeah.
And it was like sort of that turning point, that serendipitous moment that you look back on. And it was literally, yeah, this sounds like the life I want to lead. And so I come from on my mother's side, they were all big readers. So I started gathering anything I get my hands on around financial planning and investments. And when I got out of school, actually, I lived down here in Miami for a while and then went back and I thought I'd get a real job. And I saw this ad for financial planning assistant. And I'm like, oh, I remember that guy. I want to be that guy. And so I applied for this job, and it was actually with Empire Life. And now, to be fair, it was more or less a glorified telemarketing job. But at the time, I didn't care. And they gave me the book of leads, which is a phone book for those who know in the old school days where you used to get the book of leads. All you had to do was call all your leads and try to book meetings. And as tough as that might seem, and a lot of people don't like telemarketing, I thought it was the greatest thing ever. I wasn't on a horse farm. I wasn't digging a ditch, and I loved it. I loved interacting with people. Eventually, got all my licenses. Started to do very well. By the way, this was when I was 20, so
Incredible.
I was like, "This is great." And continued to do that. And then at some point during the early 90s, I'm like, you know what the future is? Mutual funds. Mutual funds are the future. I don't know why I decided that, but I decided that mutual funds were the future and I should go and pursue that. And once again, got all my licenses, started to advise clients, and eventually, through probably a longer story, I founded IPC. I wanted to do it on my own. I remember being somewhat challenged by the management of the company that I was with. I'll use that as my polite term. And I'm like, well, how hard could it be? I'll go start one of these things. And by the way, it's really hard. So anyone
Like
that tells
really
you it's easy,
hard.
Like
it's really hard.
Yeah.
It's way harder than I ever believed. And started to grow it, started to attract other people who were like-minded. And our founding principle, which holds true today, is really what we wanted to do, the problem that I tried to solve. And I interview a lot of entrepreneurs as well, and so I was like, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And the problem I was trying to solve was, advisors are great at giving advice. It's the business aspects that they have challenges with. So if I could focus on helping them build a better business, they will have more clients and they can provide better advice, and together we'll continue to do well. And that's what we did. Started bringing all the tools together, started listening to advisors, what do they need? And as a group, we were way more powerful than we were individually. And this continued. And during that time, there was also changes to regulation. There was a new called the MFDA coming into fruition, and that changed the game for a lot of people who were like me, right? Who wanted to be a financial advisor and yet owned a dealership. So all of a sudden, I had to do a whole lot of work over here that I didn't really want to do. What I really wanted to do is spend my time with my clients. And I'm like, well, if I'm like that, I'm sure everybody else is like that. And at that time, there was over 220 different companies in our space. To put that in contrast, today there's 60. So we went through a point of consolidation. People didn't want to be in that business anymore. We would buy their business, we'd absorb them, we'd create synergies, we'd go on and on and on, and built up IPC to where it is today. So that's sort of I'm going to say that's the abridged version. As you'll find out, I can talk all day on these topics. So,
and really a massive win for your company. I mean, what you saw when you trumped that up and where it's ending up today, obviously a very successful transaction last year. Company is doing very well. And you're clearly in the right space with the evolution of financial advice for the next 10 and 20 years.
Well, I think, and I tell advisors this, and I tell clients this too, like there's no better time to be in the financial advice business. And I'll tell you why. There's a few things that are happening right now. First of all, based on demographics, there's what I call this sudden money crowd that is happening. And it's happening. We used to talk about this 10, 20 years ago, that at some point there's something like $2 trillion in Canada that's going to exchange hands. Well, that's happening right now in real time. Yep. People are selling their businesses. They're inheriting money. They're selling real estate. They're selling farmland, farms, and coming into very large sums of money. And when you come into large sums of money, the first thing I would do is I would seek out advice. I would want to make sure that not only am I going to be taken care of, my family is going to be taken care of, future generations are going to be taken care of. And that requires advice. So we're in the perfect spot, right, at the perfect time. Plus, because of demographics also, there's a whole lot less experienced financial advisors. As you know, like I would say probably a third of the advisory community has left the business since the pandemic. And I would say that probably conservatively. So there's less high quality advisors with more demand for advice than there has ever been. And as I said, it's a necessary, it's a service that helps everybody because it's so vast. There's so much to know, right? That no individual can live a life and look after their finances. There are the odd individual, but most people really need to outsource it to somebody they can trust. And so, as I said, this is the best business we could be in at this time.
Succession planning is like, I feel like it's this overused term, and it's probably the equivalent for people when they hear the difference between a bond or fixed income or equities or stocks. It's like, what does that even mean, right? And within the advisory community, what I see happening is the passing of the torch, the release of control. This is the ultimate issue at hand. Everybody knows they need to retire or slow down, or they want to, transfer to be able to spend more time in Florida, etc. Right? And so I find it's a really challenging thing for people to go through. And I find the transition, and we've been through a few of them ourselves now, and we've learned so much, but it's a big deal to pass along.
It's a really big deal. And you guys are both entrepreneurs, both in the business. A lot of people, their whole identity is built around them and their position in their business. And to let go of that is daunting, absolutely, and understandably daunting. But we also have to think of the massive responsibility that we have. We have a responsibility to our clients, and that's the main thing. And as somebody who has been on both sides, right? I've bought businesses, I've bought 26, 27 dealers, but I've also sold when I was an advisor, I had to sell that practice at some point. I also had to, I bought and sold actually IPC quite a few times before we got to this particular where we are right now. And so I know, the challenges that are there. But I will say that most of them are in our head. So first of all, I'm going to go back to the responsibility that we have with our clients. We believe that we should owe it to them to make sure whoever we have taking over our business is going to do a good job, to believe in what I do, how I do it, when I do it. Now, one of the things, and I tell this story all the time, when I had to step down from being a financial advisor and focus full time on building the company, I had a guy who had been with me for years, and we had decided on successor. I knew he was going to do a good job, but I also thought I was the best financial advisor that was known to mankind. I thought that I could not, nobody could replace me. I am so good at what I do. And I remember even having this conversation. I'm like, Wayne, when you take over this book, you'll probably be lucky to keep about 70% of the clients because, when I'm not there, they're probably going to look for other opportunities elsewhere. And I just want you to know up front, what actually ended up happening is he took over the business and it went up by 15%. So I was actually holding it back the entire time. So as much as I thought that I was
Irreplaceable.
I was the person, right, irreplaceable. I was easily replaceable. I've gone through the same process with IPC in that, I brought Blaine in and took over president and CEO. I got rid of all the things I didn't like to do, started doing the things I'd like to do. But once again, was it different? Absolutely. Did it work out great? It also did. So, everybody, as much as we put in our head our self-importance in the business, we have to remember what's really important. And what's really important is our clients, and what's really important is our staff and the team that help us get there. And to make sure that they're both looked after first, I will get looked after probably just as well as we go along.
So much positive change happening in the past 5 years. When I stand on my soapbox, when I have an opportunity, I usually like to comment that I, in my opinion, the industry has changed more rapidly in the last 5 years and will change again in the next 5 years more than it's done in the last 20. I just feel like we're in this massive amount of change in how advice is delivered, what people's expectations are of advice and our advisory team. So I think it's just awesome to hear you talking like that, and lots of opportunities for growing firms and advisors.
Well, think about technology and what that's done. And
Sure.
I'll give you just two simple technologies that have now been implemented in our business and other businesses, right? We're not alone in this. Two is what we're doing right now. How has the pandemic changed how we do business? And I say this all the time. Before, as an advisor or any person who gave advice or any business, you used to be trapped by geography. Right? In other words, you had to see them or they had to see you. And the outer range of that was 2 hours, right? So if it took 2 hours to get to you, or you took 2 hours that was your outer range of your client base. Today, as I said, I'm doing this podcast from Miami, but I could be doing it from anywhere.
Yep. Yes.
Right? And the same as you could be giving advice just as easily to somebody in Vancouver as you could be giving advice to somebody in Ottawa.
Yeah.
So that has dramatically changed the scope of our potential audience for our services and
Yes.
our market.
Yes.
And number two, DocuSign. Can you remember how we used to do business without DocuSign? Like wet signatures?
I can't
Where
even
we had
believe
to
we did it.
drive the 2 hours?
I can't even believe we
How
did
do
it.
we even have an industry?
Yep.
Yes, I
And
can
yet
remember.
we still complain
yeah.
about how technologies should be better. And I'm like,
Yes.
DocuSign changed the entire game of this business
Yeah.
to make transactions so easy and so simple. And those are just two, and to your point,
Yes.
in the last 5 years. Imagine what's going to happen in the next 5 years.
Oh, of course.
Just two will set us into a whole different trajectory.
No, it's true. We had to change rules to catch up with technology because we were taking over. If I look back even 10 years ago, we were taking over substantial accounts in the Toronto GTA area. And these are people that were introduced to the firm that we actually hadn't met in person yet. And we were doing video meetings with them prior to the pandemic. This is when I thought we were way ahead of the curve. So here we are sending out transaction forms to do, we're going to move your accounts over, send it to you by mail, physical copy, only to have them open up the mail, sign it, send it back. And sometimes these transactions would take weeks of coercing and trying to get the client to complete the form and send it back. And now we do it in seconds. It's incredible. But and to your point about regulation change, like interprovincial boundaries will be coming down in the near future. I have no doubt this will put pressures on regulators to change the way they look at how a financial advisor practices inside of Ontario, Quebec, and the other provinces. So won't be long. You can for sure see that you're going to see BC advisors now doing business with Ontario clients, and Ontario advisors doing business with Eastern clients, et cetera, and how these shifts will start to happen and evolve.
How do you think, Chris, things are going to change now between the MFDA and CIRO or IROC or whatever we're calling it this year? Like,
Well, I like the direction, and it's weird that anyone in the industry likes the direction that regulators are going, but I actually like the direction that regulators are going, which is before this, there was all like different types of regulation, and they had different rules depending on where you were. So, MFDA had one set of rules, IROC had another set of rules, the ICPMs had another set of rules, insurers had another set of rules. How many set of rules do we need to keep our consumers safe? How about we just keep our consumers safe?
yes.
And so one of the, I think, mandates of CIRO is to bring these together and have a uniform set of rules that are transparent across all of the different platforms. And I think that will also fundamentally change the business and the transparency. Like, I remember I had the head of CIRO on my podcast, and he's like, imagine in the old days where you're a client and had mutual funds or at the MFDA, and then all of a sudden your guy goes to IROC and upgrades his license and education, and you got to fill out a whole set of forms. You're the consumer. You didn't do anything. You just want more services from the same advisor you had before. Does that make any sense? Now, it's going to take them a while. Yeah, as you know, regulation is hard coded and it's hard to change and it's hard to adapt. But I think the direction and the objectives they have are quite positive for our industry. But more importantly, they're more consumer focused than ever. And I think this is one of the phenomena we're seeing worldwide is just every business is more consumer focused. Before it was what's good for me, and the consumer has to adapt to how I do business, right? Even how we used to design products. We design a product and we're like, let's go find somebody to sell this to. Now there's smart business people who say, who's my consumer? What is their problem? And how can I design something to help them? What is their problem? And that is changing, and it's exciting because that is what business is all about, is identifying consumer problems for a large enough niche that are willing to pay you to help solve their problems. And it's exciting because technology allows you to do that.
So as we continue to see these evolutions, Chris, like clearly you're ingrained now with this Advice Canada, or part of that new change, and clearly the message there is evolving to accommodate entrepreneurial like firms that are growing teams that have done very much what you've done in the past. Probably less likely to come across a solopreneur 10 or 15 years from now in this space, more likely to come across an ensemble type practice, if I'm guessing correctly, where you have multi-disciplines, multi-specialties, advisors, and even team members who have a variety of different experiences that can help the client experience. But as that continues to happen, where do you see most of the pressure right now for firms like ours? Like, is it like my guess is we're going to see issues. We run into it from time to time. Lack of transition planning, like Corey had mentioned earlier. So the need to have this, emergency transition plan in place, or the need to have some conversations about where does this go next. But in the next 10 years, with this changing regulations, where do you see what should firms be looking at the most?
Well, I think, as a business person and as somebody who not only, has been part of businesses, but I have lots of friends who are in businesses and studied what businesses do and don't do successfully. I think one of the hardest things we need to do is adapt our business around systems, right? Again, this industry started, remember, in sales. We used to have products and we used to sell them to people, right? I started insurance. We had an insurance product. We'd go out and find people and we'd sell it to them, right? Then we got mutual funds. These mutual fund guys would come around. They'd design some sort of product, some weird thing, and then we'd go around and, we used to have, they call them the pizza guys. They'd come in on Friday and they'd buy you a pizza and they'd tell you a story, and then you go find clients to sell that story. and that got us to where we are. But now that's not it anymore. Now it's about advice. Now it's again client centric. It's about that client experience. I think our biggest challenge is to create an experience that can be duplicated when you're not there. Like one of the challenges is we have two challenges in this industry, right? One is complexity, far too much complexity, far too many products that do the same thing, far too many pricing models, far too many different systems that all run the same thing. And that causes challenges, right? Because a business is only as valuable as it is easy for someone else to take over. So I tell the story, and so this is where we have to think in the future. I tell a story, and I'm writing a book, and there's one of the chapters in the story actually. On the way to, I have a little farm north of Toronto, and as I drive up there, there's two coffee shops across the road from each other. One's Pete's Donuts, and the other is Tim Hortons. And I ask people, which one would you rather own? And of course, you'd rather own Tim Hortons. Right? Why? Because Pete has to get up at 4:30 in the morning. Pete has to make his own donuts. Pete has to do his own bookkeeping. Pete has to do his own website. Pete has to do his own customer service. Pete has to do his own marketing. And if Pete wants to go to, Italy for a month, what do you think is going to happen to Pete's Donuts? Meanwhile, across the street,
no more Pete's.
Pete's not going to do so well. And across the street, you got Tim Hortons, is owned by a dentist. Probably been in there 4 times last year, and pulls out $250,000 a year of net profit to own that. That's always the entrepreneurial dilemma. Do I build it around me, or do I build it around processes? Right. And where I sit, you build it around processes. And I think that's going to be our challenge. We're going to go from these big personality type practices to practices that run like clockwork. And those are the two that you will see emerge over time.
Interesting. And so do you think the shift that's going to take place here now with Xero, with the larger financial institutions allowing advisors to be incorporated and so forth, like, do you think we have this mass movement into Xero and like an exodus out of the MFDA?
Well, I think all that Xero will allow you to do is have choices for your business and choices around your consumer. So in other words, depending on the type of business that you run, all that Xero will allow you to do is an expansion of the types of things that you can recommend to that client. Really, that's it. As complicated as they want to make it seem, it's not really. When you have because it's like that in the US. You just have different levels of registration, and all that level of registration tells you and tells the consumer is this is what you can advise on, and here's what you can't. And so, depending on your time frame, you certainly want to continue to upgrade both your education levels and the level of product that you can offer your clients where appropriate. If you don't have clients where it's appropriate, then there's no reason to do anything to your business. Right. But I think all it's going to, and as I said, I think it's a positive thing. All it's going to offer people is just more choice and more opportunity in how they build their businesses. And from a consumer point of view, what their advisor can advise on going forward.
What inning do you think we're in? If this was a game, what inning are we in with fee-for-service financial planning?
Well, I think fee-for-service planning has been around a long time. How successful it is a whole other thing.
Sure.
In other words, and I'm going to define fee for planning as somebody who charges for a service, meaning if you do a financial plan, you charge $5,000. Right? So I'm going to use that as opposed to fee for services. I'm going to charge a variable fee to manage your assets, which I put into a different category. Yeah. Right? Fee for service planning has been around for 25 years, maybe longer since I've been in the business. Problem is, it's just not successful. You know why? Try to get 5,000 out of somebody.
Right. You
get it the first time. Try getting it the second time.
Yeah.
Try getting the third time.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. It's good on paper. If you've ever been in a business where there's receivables, you don't want to be in a business where there's receivables.
Right. That makes sense. I do feel like I see a shift in the industry where it seems to be more common. I feel like that was where the industry is. Obviously, you're right. It's been around for a long time, but I just feel like it's being professionalized year by year. And I feel like the need by clients for fairly impartial, or the best you can get impartial advice, was important. So I was just interested in your answer there.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is absolutely important. The impartial advice, but I believe good advisors, licensed or not licensed, should be impartial. Right. So in other
You'd hope
words,
so.
in my world, and my world, by the way, my sky is very blue. It doesn't mean I live in the real world, but in my little tiny world, an advisor has an obligation to give his clients the best advice and the most unbiased advice. Because if you give biased advice, I'm not sure how long I would take your advice.
And that's fair. It's all relationships, right? It's if you don't do good for the client, you're not going to be very successful in this business.
Well, I don't think you'd be very successful, I'm going to say, in any business, right? And that's what I'm saying about this modern world of everything is instantaneous, everything's online, reviews are online, everything is online. You got to be good at what you do, or everyone's going to know about it. Before, you just, like, they might tell your neighbor you're doing a bad job.
Yeah.
Now they can tell everyone.
Yeah, in about 5 minutes.
Yeah,
exactly.
In about using video and YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, and I had to sit back as a business person, that's a good thing. It holds everybody in check. You can't get away with anything. There's no such thing as anything being opaque anymore. Everything is transparent. And so for the people who do a good job, this is heaven. Because, we talked about this probably at dinner, there's challenges in business. And one of the biggest challenges is unethical competitors, right?
Yes.
When you see it and you're like, hey, that's not fair. Like, that's not right. You can't do that. And this is a challenge because all you seem like is you're squealing on them. And in the meantime, you can see quite blatantly that this is not in the best interest of a client. So that's a challenge in all businesses, which I think is diminishing as, this transparency comes as a result of technology.
So since we're on the topic of challenges, I wouldn't mind asking it. The success you've had has been exceptional, and certainly the story you've told us about over the last half an hour, but I'd love to go back to a point in time. It almost looks like you wrote it out perfectly, but I'm sure it hasn't always gone perfectly for you. There's been challenges along the way. Can you describe to us and let us know a little bit about a particularly difficult time during your story? Like, was there a time where you thought, you know what, I think I'm on the wrong road, or this is where IPC ends because maybe I made some bad decisions? Was there a challenge like that at any point in time? Did you have any second guesses that you on your plan?
So first of all, if there is a book called All the Wrong Things to Do in Business, I could write that book and it would be a bestseller.
We got a couple chapters.
We've got a couple.
We've got a couple chapters we can throw in there too. So
you could throw in
a forward. I can write a forward.
Bad companies. I've had wrong strategies. I've gone down the wrong path. But I'll tell you, the ones that I'm going to say hurt generally always revolve around people. Right? You trusted the wrong person. You got in business with the wrong person. You let the wrong person in your team for too long and did too much damage. And all of this, and you guys know this, you knew in your gut. You knew it. And you let it happen anyway. Like, I remember one particular transaction. I was like shaking my head to myself. I'm like, this is not going to end well. I know it's not going to.
Got a bad feeling about this.
It's a bad feeling. There's just something about that guy I don't like, and I should have listened to it. And you spend a lot of time, and you spend a lot of time mentoring and bringing people up and helping them build their business. And then for a couple dollars, they totally betray you and move somewhere else. Right. Like, we've all had that, and that is gut wrenching. Like, that's the stuff that hurts, especially to a guy like me who loves people and loves to help people. And you feel like, to your point, why bother? Why bother helping people if this is what they're going to do? They're just, the second that they get $10 more, or 2% more on their grid or whatever it may be, that they're just going to leave you.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, more don't do that than do that. So it would be unfair to allow a few people to change the trajectory of what you think is important, which is helping people. So that's the one that's really gut wrenching. Those are the ones that keep you awake for a week on time. And, it's just when you feel betrayed is when you're like, why bother? But you get over it, and you work with other people who are just the nicest people in the world and do a great job.
Yeah, I think it's the percentages, right? I think at the end of the day, you look and you say, okay, that's only been 3 or 4% of bad apples versus the rest of the bowl, right?
Right.
It's kind of where it goes, and I think I don't, we always look at this stuff like, could I have avoided that? Could I have done this? Could I have done that? And I really truly feel that it's part of business. It's part of life, right? It's why life's a 4-letter word. It's it just keeps coming.
I was going to say, and if there was a secret formula, I would impart it, but there's not, right? As I said, you don't know where it's coming, and it shocks you every time. But other than as I said, strategic mistakes and buy the wrong company and that kind of stuff, the ones that hurt are usually around people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nothing 2 days away from work can't solve. We just go, I'm taking a couple days. I'm just going to reset. I just need a few hours to myself.
Yeah.
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 Corey and I we've had a couple of those, and it's always kind of energize each other, I think, a little bit there. That's
Well, I think you have to,
we're
right?
good for a
Even
big pat in the back.
Well, even when you get beat up a little bit, like it's like, okay, what did we learn? You're probably not going to make that same mistake again. Otherwise, it's the definition of stupidity. So it's don't do that, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's part of it. But when you first start, it feels like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening, and what's going on? And you lose your mind. And you go through a few more, and okay, we know there's, a percentage that could be problematic, but overall it's pretty good. And so I think it's keeping that, in front of you, that it's not always just a complete disaster because of one event, right?
I feel like we're wiser when we walk into the boardroom. I feel like we've done this like right several times, but wrong a few times. It's like we know better.
Yeah.
There's other surprises coming, but
yeah.
I think we've done a pretty good job. But I can certainly, when you're talking, Chris, I'm like, oh God, that's every business owner. That's why I ask, because I find we've had so many interviews with successful people that most people think, you know what, this person was handed like the perfect life. They've got a successful business that anyone would want, and man, I want that. But what most people don't realize or aren't willing to take upon is the pain that person's gone through, like the challenge, the sacrifice, just the risk, like the risk alone sometimes. Like there's lots of people who say, oh, I'd love that. But it's like, okay, that person at one point was like pushing all the chips in, and it's like, I'm risking on this idea. And most people would have said no a lot earlier than that.
Yeah, I think that goes with, Steve Jobs said that, what is the thing that makes successful? It's just raw persistence. If you don't love what you do, you'll give up easy. And it's just sticking with it. And the other point that comes with that is, you're going through succession now where people are bringing their kids in, and their kids are like, this is the greatest business ever. I get to, do what my dad did. I get to travel to Europe now. I get to have all this money. I get to do that. And I'm like, I knew your dad in the day. And when he was building this business,
That's right.
He'd be working till 9 o'clock at night.
Yep.
He'd be coming in on Sundays. He would be
Kitchen
sacrificing
table.
everything.
Making
All you
$25.
see, and remember, packing his own lunch because he couldn't afford to buy stuff at the restaurant. I remember those days. You get to see him in all his glory and say, "That's the life I want." But you have to say, do you have the passion, or do you want the paycheck? Those are the two things that you have
Well, it's
to
like when you
decide on.
said of the guy that you saw at your dad's farm, right? Oh, he does nothing, right? Like how many times have we heard that in our careers? Well, you guys, your job's so easy. You don't have to do anything. You just go drive your car and show up and play golf, or go do this, or go for a lunch. And like, it's so far from that. Like, sure, we do get some perks of those things, but I find overall, like, there's a fair amount of good and bad stress and highs and lows and things that you can't control, whether it's the stock market, whether it's, the latest administration, whether it's climate change, whether it's and like, it doesn't really ever stop. You don't stop learning. You have to continuously be absorbing vast amounts of information on a fairly routine basis. Like if you stick your head in the sand and come back up 6 months later, not so good.
And most financial advisors or anyone in this business, that phone doesn't stop. Like,
Ever.
yeah,
Ever. Yeah.
it just goes
And nor
and
should
goes
it.
and goes, right? It's like you're in contact, and clients sometimes everyone may not get a call all the time, but that advisor is connected. If there's an emergency, you can get in touch with them. They can get back to you. This never stops. So I think there's this unseen stress that just happens all the time.
Totally. Because everybody else's life is also moving and changing and evolving on a day-to-day basis, right? So nothing stays static.
But they do see the nice lifestyle at one point. It becomes recognizable.
Yes.
They just don't see all that pain.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
They don't see it before that.
Yeah.
As my dad, the saying he gave me when I first started, I told him, I'm going on my own. I'm going to start my own business. He's like, you're going to be an entrepreneur, are you? Guess you get to work half days. You just have to pick which 12 hours it's going to be.
That's right.
I like that one. That's
right.
pretty good. I
That's
like
right.
that. I like that. Yeah.
So with all that challenge and the rigmarole that goes on, Chris, like, how have you found to be most successful to balance some of that stress and that never-ending lifestyle with your own personal lifestyle so that you can have time with your family, you can reset and recharge? Like, what's important to you? How do you bring that into your life?
It's a great question, and I had the privilege or fortunate that I was a strategic coach alumni, and I'm sure you may have heard of a strategic coach.
Yes.
Maybe you guys are members. But one of the things that I got out of that very early was, time is your most crucial asset, and it's where you spend your time. And I came from a long line of workaholics. My grandfather was a doctor. His father before that was a doctor. They were workaholics. My dad was a workaholic. My brother was a workaholic. You know what it got all them? Death. That's what it got them, right? They got to die earlier than the rest of us. That's what workaholics get. And one of the premises that was taught early in the coaching days was all great innovations come after a time period off, a time period away from it. And I took that seriously. And even back when I started, I used to work 4 weeks, take a week off. And I didn't have to go anywhere. I just didn't work. And I have kept that continually going to modern day, where I take 3 months off. I love traveling. I like cooking. Do cooking schools all over the place. So that just gets built in, and how they do it and how I do it is I block all my time off first, and then my work time has to fill in around it. Whereas most people say, "Oh, I'm too busy to take any time off." Right? I'm taking time off. We better figure out how I'm not busy over that time period. So that is very important. And it's true. Every time and you guys probably have had this phenomenon. Every time you take a couple weeks off, you come back not only fresh, but with better ideas than you had before.
Every time, Chris, as you're saying it, it's reminding me, I'm like, oh, that's so true. It is so true.
Yep.
Every time. I also will readily admit I've had burnout twice. And if you've had it, you don't want it again.
What'd that look like for you?
A lot of sleep is really what you just, if you haven't seen the symptoms, you just disengage.
Right.
You hate everybody. You don't want to have any interaction with anybody. You basically stay home and you know it. And you can, no matter what you do, you can't get motivated. Right. And the only cure for it is time off. And I was going to say it only happened once. No, it happened twice. So, but then, you have to be really, especially if you're on, we have on positions, right? Where we have massive amounts of responsibility, people counting on you, your decisions are important, you're on. And so when you're off, and I don't take any calls. I don't do anything when I'm off. I'm off. But when I'm on, I'm on. Yep. And so I think it's just a discipline that becomes a habit that you just have. And now I don't work after a certain hour. Fridays, you'll never see me. And I try to take 3 months off a year, spaced out over the year, so that I have lots of time to refresh. And really, because now I'm more in a thinking job than I am a doing job. So.
It's wonderful. And you clearly like cooking. So let's talk about that. Chef Chris, if we're coming over to Chris's place for dinner, what are you most likely going to cook up for us? And maybe some influences on where you like to draw those ideas from.
Well, well, I can do almost anything, but I grew up in King City. So if those who know King City, it's a predominantly Italian neighborhood.
Yep.
I was the only Mangia cake in my street.
I was
So
gonna say
all the,
you were definitely one of the white boys.
I was certainly one of the white boys. And funny enough, none of the other kids wanted to cook, but all the nonas knew that I wanted to learn. So I learned from all the nonas there. I did the cooking school. I also went down to Salerno and spent some time in a house learning how to cook real Italian. And so I'd say if I had a specialty, it was probably Italian, but I also know how to do Vietnamese from scratch. I can do Thai from scratch. Chinese food I can do from scratch. So I try to learn a new recipe, like a new form of cooking every year. I eat, and I should be a lot bigger than
We're gonna have to do like a Cooking with Chris show next. I think
Exactly.
this is,
Exactly.
Funny enough, when the pandemic was going on, that's what we did is in lieu of a conference. We had a cooking thing.
Okay.
We had brought a professional chef and me, and went through it. So that would be, if any, there's a hobby, that would be my hobby. I love that.
Where do you think things are going to go in this current environment with conferences? Like with what's going on with this travel to the US that's, starting to percolate. Like, do you think it all dissipates? Do you think it goes away and we go back to some form of normalcy here? Or is this
I've been around 30 years. Here's what I know. People have a memory of about 3 months. And so, we had a major financial meltdown in 2008 and 2009. Not like we have now. Now there's nothing. There's just like a bunch of terraces, just like saber rattling.
Yeah.
We had a major financial meltdown. A year later, could anyone remember that we had a major financial meltdown?
Yeah.
It went right out of people's memories. So if I had to speculate, 6 months from now, people won't even remember what a tariff is.
Yeah.
It's just, and it just happens to be, by the way, around our election. So it's a good one to.
lots of posturing right now. Lots of posturing.
Goodness
Oh
gracious.
goodness, yeah.
But I also will tell you, if you went from my client point of view, I haven't bought an individual stock in over a year because of relative valuation.
Yeah.
I bought a whole lot last week. So
It's a great time to buy, right? During wealth building, when people generally, from a psychology perspective, really don't like the volatility on this side of it. We talk about it all the time. Everybody here does. But man, when you're in this is the time that people need to train themselves to say that, you know what, this is a good moment right now. We need to look for those opportunities. But I think a lot of times people hold back, they're cautious, they're worried, and they only want to, most people start pushing chips in at the wrong time. When they start hearing the good news and their markets have recovered, they're like, oh, fantastic, I made 12%. Well, maybe I should take that $100,000 and stick it in the market. It's like, man, you should have done that 3 months ago.
Yeah. So
right.
Really.
Well, it's a great indicator. As I said, I've been in this business a long time.
Yes.
Here's what I wait for. When everybody is buying cash, by putting their money into cash, that's when I'm buying equities. And when everyone's buying equities, that's when I move my money into cash. And if you just do that, just follow what everybody else is doing, you know that for the most part, everybody's wrong 100% of the time.
Right.
Or 90% of the time.
Yeah. Most of the time you're always
90. Let's not say 100.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's that saying? It's Anchorman or whatever. It works 50% of the time, every time.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
No,
like
it's
that.
true. There's lots of volatility, though. This is what I think most people are worried about, especially business owners. Like this change, any kind of regulatory change is always an issue for any business. Like when I'm listening to people talking about how it's impacting them, what's around the corner. I mean, everybody's trying to predict where this is going to be and what's going to feel like. I would tend to hope that this is going to simmer down at one point. There's going to be some change. It may not be as drastic as what we've been thinking and being told, but there will be change. And for the most part, most businesses will overcome this change.
I agree. And also, you only know when you know. That's the thing. It is we can speculate on a lot of things, and we can only use the data that we have at our disposal. But you only really know something when you know it. And that's another thing of entrepreneurship. There are people who need to know everything before they make a decision. And you guys know this better than anyone. You can't know everything. So what information do you need to make a decision, and how do you get that information? Whereas again, we all human beings have a tendency of extrapolation. We take little pieces of information and we say things like, all my clients want this. And I'm like, really? You talk to all your clients? And the answer was no, I talked to 2 clients.
Yeah, 2%.
And it's bundled with
Right.
partially with how I'm feeling. So I feel like that's a lot. When people say everyone, sometimes it means me plus one other person or something along
Right.
those lines. Right?
Somebody that agrees to me. And so that
Right.
is, and so entrepreneurs try to get the right information so they can make the right decisions, because you don't need vast amounts. You just need a certain level of information that you can be really confident. But going back to tariffs, I'm a Milton Friedman economics guy. And you know what he says about tariffs? It's like a gunfight on a lifeboat.
It's not good.
Eventually, it's a bad idea for everybody.
Yeah,
right?
not good. Not good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You just kind of wonder how did they not already come to that conclusion yet?
Well, I try to stay away from political commentary, but I'm not sure that is the conclusion. I think the conclusion is just to get people to the negotiating table,
Yeah.
of which 80 have already done as a taping of this show.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
there's only 195 countries in the world. So
Yeah.
I think might be a strategy versus
Just a reset.
actual thing.
Just a reset.
Right.
Yeah, it's time to realign what we all do and what everybody's throwing in the mix. This is that would be very on brand, right? Because that came up the last time. The last time they were in was talking about NATO and who's doing what and who's paying for what. So I think this has been a very common theme that's on brand for that government.
Yeah.
I think you're spot on. It's not something that, and as I said, I'm pretty sure everybody else has read Milton Friedman too. So I'm not sure that all of the reactionary ideas are a good idea either. But anyhow, we'll see how it plays out.
We start talking about an opinion and stuff, though. I do worry sometimes, like especially as it relates to media and how media gets consumed. You must see that too, being in the U.S. at times. It's just, I'm sure the story gets told differently. I know here, it's hard for me to sit down, like back 30 years ago, you'd sit and watch Walter Cronkite or whoever tell the news, and it was just the news. It was just, this happened. And I feel like 90% of whomever I turn to for news consumption now, I'm getting an opinion of what happened. I'm not getting the actually what happened. And I'm sure you find that as well.
I find it very much so, especially, I live here in Miami. All my family's in Canada, and my daughter lives in Great Britain and lives in London. And I can tell you the bias on all three from how they see the exact same issue has a lot to do with algorithms and social media and emotion, and very little to do with any fact whatsoever.
I think even how most people in the Valley, the Ottawa Valley, consume, it's different just from person to person because of the way the feeds work. Like I think I could be on my own social media and I see one set of news, and then my dad or a friend could be on theirs and seeing something entirely different that just feeds the narrative to whatever they're wanting to see to some degree.
Right. And I think that that's accurate. So it is hard to, right, what is fiction, what is opinion? And one of my tests is, who wrote that? Like literally, I could be a journalist. I could write an article and I could publish it about you.
Right.
Based on no facts. I'd just say, this is what I think.
Well, that's real.
And people would consume it, and there would be no blowback to me at all. You wouldn't even know I could do it under a false name. So I'm always very, very cautious about the sources that I'm getting information from.
So how does that relate to things like, well, right now, it's relevant, like financial information on TikTok, or if people get, I'm seeing this more and more often now, financial advice from Instagram Reels, TikTok, their kids' social media. It's crazy, the kind of information, and I feel like we've lost control of almost like the regulatory side of being able to say certain things. Like I don't like a lot of rules, but man, like you can only go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist to get certain information. You can only go to a doctor to get certain information. How is it that we've allowed financial advice to be given by somebody who works at a salon or something? I don't understand.
And that's the thing, is the unregulated social media. Like there are people who give health advice that aren't doctors. And I have friends who say, oh, I read, this is what they say. I read that if you do this, this is,
Right.
you will live longer. And I'm like, first of all, did you read it, or was it on Facebook?
Is that a
And then I went to
doctor of what?
Facebook. And I'm like,
What
was
kind
it
of doctor were they?
or was it just an influencer that was on
How many
in South
followers
Beach?
do they have?
Right. Like and I had this discussion not too long ago. Like there's a big difference between somebody who is a knowledgeable professional who does it for a living,
Yes.
and somebody who just like has an opinion on what stocks they should buy at any one time, and there's zero ramifications to them personally if it doesn't work out. I'm against all of these types of things, and whether it is actually for me or somebody else, which is, no matter what, I can't trust any information as it relates to that. I have to go to professionals.
So, just kind of jumping topics a little bit in terms of IPC, what makes an advisor attracted to want to be at IPC?
Well, I think, the types of advisors who generally are at IPC are mainly advice first, right? In other words, they believe in advice. And I say that there's two types, there's multiple types, but there's two major types of advisor. There's one that's product focused, and there's one that's client and advice focused. We have products, don't get me wrong, but the majority would tend to be advice and client focused, right? And that is because that is, if you hear me as the founder or anybody else in the company, what we talk about all the time is the client experience. What does the client experience? What does the client see? How does the client be affected? What kind of advice should the client has? Whereas if you have, I'm going to call it a manufacturing company, they're all about product and market and, volatility and MER. And I illustrate this with a story. Actually, so my mom lives in Ottawa, and she has an advisor who's Ottawa based. IPC advisor, of course.
Of course.
And she was down here visiting me, and she's like, "Oh, I love my advisor. I love him. He's so cool. He's so good." And finally, I'm like, "What, Mom? What do you exactly like about your financial advisor?" "Oh, he calls me just to ask how I'm doing on a regular basis, and he doesn't talk any business." I'm like, "Oh, that's very nice of him. I'm glad that he does that." I'm like, so Mom, do you know what rate of return you made last year?"
No.
"Nope." "Do you know what you pay him to manage all of your investments and your?" "Nope." "Mom, could you name 3 things that you hold in your portfolio?" Nope. "But I love my advisor." And I'm not saying that that those things should be not important. Investments are important. Cost is important. Right? The types of investment you hold are important. But what people care about is that you care about them.
Yeah.
So to go back to your question, we generally attract advice-focused advisors who want to run a business, a financial advice business, and to that point, that is repeatable, predictable, great client experience attached to good technology. That's who generally is attracted to IPC.
Right.
That's so true. And it works for obviously what's most important for the client. I see that over and over again. All those things you mentioned, Chris, those are super important. But man, you're right about your mom's experience. Most people, they want to have that relationship. They want to trust you. When the financial crisis happens in 2008, people are in massive fear. They just want to reach out and be told, "Hey, you're okay." When it's the COVID crisis and they can't, there was literally days. I'm watching Twitter feeds and people are saying, "I can't reach my bank advisor. I can't reach." Like that was the importance of having a relationship, was to be able to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, am I going to be okay?" And that's such an important element. That's a non-tangible. It's not a fee. It's not a product, but it's an important element of trust. That's what I think is really key.
Absolutely. And if you think of experiences in your life, what's your favorite restaurant? And your favorite restaurant is probably somewhere where the food is really good, but more importantly, you're a known commodity. They know your name when you come in. They know what kind of wine you drink. They know what table you like. They chat with you and wonder how your life is going. The food has to be good, don't get me wrong. But what separates someone that just has good food and someplace that you will go back to time and time again is your experience.
Yes.
1,000%.
Yeah, we've spent a long time working on experience, so we totally are on the same page with you on that one. Yeah.
It's been awesome having you on, Chris. Like listening to your beginnings and the struggles and how you built the practice and sharing some of the inside stuff, even that I didn't realize about the cooking part. So that's awesome. But on behalf of Corey and I can't say thanks enough for taking some time out of your schedule to spend with us and tell us your story.
Yes, thank you very much, Chris. It's great. Yep.
It's been my pleasure. I love it. And as you can see, there's nothing I like more than talking, and even more, I love talking about me. So it's
a
been
win-win.
a very pleasurable hour.
It's all good. Well, thank you very much. Great having you on, Chris.